Ray Rickman for coming in today on Friday to give his big view. I'm excited to welcome my next guest here into the studio, Rhode Island native Spencer Sullivan. Thanks for joining us again.
Happy to be on as always.
Okay, well, we're going to get the inside the Beltway take, lean campaign strategies. But before we go to the political season, let's just talk about the political climate in general. Really want to kick off with Trump lawyer Michael Cohen. His issues stem beyond Stormy Daniels at the moment. So let's talk a little bit about why he's at the center of the firestorm. And let's talk about AT&T's engagement of him. And is this business as usual, or is there something more to this?
I don't think anything with the Trump administration is business as usual. And I think that kind of leads to the hand of what we're talking about here is what they're saying is that AT&T paid Michael Cohen for essentially strategic insight, right? Not live. So coming up doesn't look great. But again, it's one more thing that comes out. You know, I think one of the questions is how were these documents leaked, which is an important thing to talk about as well. But again, PRI is not great. The interesting part here, though, is when the FBI raided Michael Cohen's office, it was the public corruption unit that did that, right? And it's the public corruption unit that would go after something like this.
And so, how do you think Michael Cohen fares?
What else does Bob Mueller know, right? I think Bob Mueller knows a lot more than we do. And I think, only more is going to come out, and we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I can't sit here and tell you or anyone here how it's going to end up, because there's probably a lot more information out there that we don't even know about yet.
So in a little bit, we're going to be talking with Terrence Rohrig at the Naval War College here. He's an expert on the Korean Peninsula. Let's talk a little bit about Trump and his relations with North Korea, what we've seen, and what is it correlated to inside the Beltway? What's the response been to how Trump has brokered this basically peace between North and South Korea, going to meet with Kim Jong-un? What's the reaction been like?
I think it's cautiously optimistic, right? I mean, North Korea is a very tricky issue to talk about. I mean, we've been to these stages before with North Korea. Maybe not as far as this at this stage, with as many concessions or kind of the limelight that you see North Korea having right now. Obviously, the fear is, North Korea is just doing this. It's putting this good show on to be legitimate, to appear legitimate, and to gain more highlights on the world stage, right? So I think the issue comes down to, what does this meeting look like? I think there's some concern on the left that Trump will just cut a deal because he sees himself as a negotiator. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's willing to walk away. I think there's a lot of good stuff there to be had. And I think in Trump's favor is his unpredictability, right? We saw these with the tariffs. We saw this. A lot of these foreign policy, a lot of these countries, foreign actors don't know how to work with Trump. And obviously, unpredictability is not always the greatest thing in some aspects of foreign policy, right? But in terms of negotiations and deal making, it can't hurt.
Do we have any sense? I mean, we've heard a date, I believe June 12th in Singapore. If you're a betting man, does it happen on that day as planned?
Again, nothing is usual with this administration. I think we're going to see a great photo op. Hopefully a good come about from that meeting. Maybe some type of agreement in place, negotiations in place to continue negotiations. We've seen how long it takes NAFTA to go along with those negotiations, and the Chinese tariffs and everything else, and the Iran deal. But I think, if everything goes well, maybe we see some type of, photo op, handshake, a mutual agreement to work on, and then kind of let both countries figure it out from there.
So we've seen a lot of progress on the front with North Korea, but obviously we've seen some dismantlement with Iran. What's the talk there as to where things stand now moving forward as we see hostilities between Iran and Israel?
Yeah, I think what you're really seeing here is just a more pro-Israel U.S. administration, right? I mean, the former President Obama administration wasn't very pro-Israel, striking that Iran deal. And what you see here is Israel, of course, and obviously the United States being very concerned over the influence that Iran has peddled in the Middle East. since the past couple of years or so. So what you're seeing here is obviously Israel is getting very upset, very concerned of Iran trying to place military strategic bases in Syria to attack Israel from there, right? So I think you're seeing Israel trying to obviously defend its own sovereignty from those attacks, like, as it should, and then trying to really stop or reduce or even slow down the influence of Iran expanding throughout the region of the world, which is probably also due to the Iran deal and the billions of dollars of assets it's received, right, from the Iran deal in order to peddle more influence.
And concerns talk about the future, as you just talked a little bit about Iran-Israeli relations, for potential for destabilization. On one peninsula of the Korean one, we see some seeds sown to see some stability, but now there are some X factors as it pertains to the Middle East. Yeah,
and I think the Middle East is it's going to stay that way. I don't think one president is going to solve it, to be honest with you. I don't think anyone really expects that. I think you got to take it deal by deal, region by region, and I think that's something where President Trump's working on, is trying to negotiate deals, work within the countries he can work with, and take it by case basis.
So let's go from some foreign policy to something more domestic, your bread and butter as a consultant, with midterms coming up. How big's your roster, Spencer?
Yeah, it's good. It's a lot of good stuff out there on the Senate side, the House side, a lot of good Senate races to watch. I think even we saw today, or even yesterday, the generic ballot's closing down very close. I think it's down to like 3 percentage points. Democrats favored. Back in February, the generic ballot was, I think, 16 percentage points in favor of the Democrats, or close to. So you're seeing a lot of the, and even I think 2 days ago, you saw a poll come out through CNN saying, 57% of the people think the country's on the right track, which is a very impressive number, which is a very strong number for the Republicans to rely on coming onto the midterms, because, as you know, the midterms are often a check and balance on the current administration. However, if you're seeing the majority of Americans saying the country's on the right track, then that's obviously going to be a little bit more difficult for Democrats to run against President Trump in certain swing districts. I think the last time in 2010, when the House switched from Democrats to Republicans, that same question was polled, right or wrong track for the country. It was like around 26, 27%. So 57% is a very impressive number. Obviously, President Trump's approval rating stays in the 40% range, which isn't ideal, but it's staying steady. And it's not like he was ever in a very high approval rating to begin with.
So you talk about, is this the best position the Republicans have been in this year with those numbers that you talk about?
Yeah, I would say so. But again, things change so quickly. Politically, things can change. One tweet away, one mishap away. If the North Korea thing becomes into this massive failure or something else happens, politically, everything can shift on very quickly on a dime, right? So the question is, I think there's a little momentum here in the past couple of weeks, a good amount of good news. Of course, the distractions are always there with Russia and Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, whatever it may be. The distractions are always going to be there, and I think the American people are getting used to that. I don't think they're a huge fan of the president, but they like some of the achievements he's been getting done, right? Tax reform, taking care of ISIS and making sure that's not a problem. Seeing the momentum with the North Korea negotiations, right? So I think there's some momentum here, but as in the past year and a half shows you anything, we often like to step on our own toes and stop the momentum. So can we, or can President Trump or the Republican Party continue that momentum for as long as possible?
So what are some of the key races that we're keeping an eye on? And of course, feel free to mention some that you might have some say in. Yeah,
so I think on the Senate side anyway, it's a very defensive map for the Democrats. There's a lot more Democrats up for election in which states that Trump won, right? You're looking at North Dakota, Montana, West Virginia, or even Missouri, right? I think a good outcome in the West Virginia primary you saw last week, or 2 days ago, was that the more unifying Republican candidate won in West Virginia, which is going to make life a little bit more harder for Joe Manchin. Then on the House side, it's really going to come down to the suburban districts and can the Republican Party maintain the suburban vote, even though a lot of the suburban districts are not a huge fan of President Trump. And I think, ideally, in my own personal opinion on the House side, it's really going to come down to, how many seats can the Republican Party hang on to in Pennsylvania? That map's been completely thrown out the window, put back in. Everything's new. Orange County, I think there would be a lot of people surprised how many Republicans are elected, Republican members of Congress in California on the House side.
Okay.
Can Orange County hold 3 or 4 of those seats? And then, little bits of races in Illinois and throughout the country. But again, it comes down, can you, on both sides of the, I think I saw a poll the other day in which gas station sushi had a higher approval rating than the Republican or Democratic Party, right? So none of the parties are really likable. So as a candidate, as a Republican or a Democrat, can you appeal to the base, but also distance yourself enough to win the swing voters in the swing districts, right?
It's a fine dance. It's a fine line. I appreciate you're giving us a little bit of the insights. $1 million question, will Spencer Sullivan be back in Rhode Island this summer?
I hope so. I hope to get back up there. I think time's flying by. I got to get away at some point, get back up there, go to Block Island, see the family, get some Dell's lemonade, right? Of course, maybe catch a Red Sox game. But I'd love to. It's just a matter of if I can actually spare the time and even plan it out.
It's the busy season. It's the silly season. We are fully in campaign mode here. I appreciate picking your brain a little bit as to what to watch for the midterms and giving us a little bit of the inside scoop as to what's taking place down in D.C. Spencer Sullivan, appreciate, as always, getting your perspective here.
Thank you.
In the studio. Thanks, Spencer Sullivan. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Bob Wickham.